the usual suspects, I'll call them, on the left in the media, is just, again, not looking in the mirror. It did
no, they
not,
think
it
they
did
didn't
not,
call him Hitler loudly enough.
Or that just a lot of people texted me things like, well, you can't fix stupid. Sorry, that doesn't work with me. Yeah, you're stupid because you're not thinking about the bigger picture. You're not thinking about maybe we did something wrong. Maybe we're not perfect. America dumped you, and they're all like, you don't know what you had. Yes, they do. They know what they had. And what they're saying is, we know what we had, and you're...
Bill Maher just did it again. He took on an MSNBC pundit who was so deep in their bubble, they didn't even see it coming. And trust me, he did not hold back. He called out the left's obsession with Trump, the constant media meltdowns, and the double standards that no one on TV ever admits. You could see the moment when the MSNBC pundit realized they had no comeback. It was brutal. So what did Maher actually say? And why is this moment going viral? Well, buckle up, because once you hear his hard truths, you might never look at the media the same way again. Let's get into it. Bill Maher is back at it again, and this time he's taking direct aim at left-wing pundits who seem trapped in their own echo chamber. In his latest hard-hitting commentary, Maher doesn't hold back as he exposes the smugness and self-righteousness that dominate political discussions on networks like MSNBC. Time and time again, we see these pundits doubling down on their narratives, refusing to engage in any real self-reflection. But Maher is here to call them out, making it clear that their relentless obsession with attacking Trump might actually be their biggest weakness. Instead of focusing on constructive dialogue, they seem more interested in pushing exaggerated outrage, and Maher thinks it's time for a serious wake-up call. So, does he have a point? That's for you to decide, but one thing's for sure, his take is sparking major debate. Let's break it all down. Maher isn't saying Trump shouldn't be criticized, far from it, but he's calling out the way it's being done. Instead of offering level-headed analysis, many left-wing pundits and media figures react with exaggerated hysteria, making everything sound like an existential crisis, and according to Maher, that approach often backfires. He argues that the media should be a voice of reason, providing thoughtful critique rather than non-stop panic. But instead, many pundits come across as though they're performing for an audience, more interested in stirring outrage than offering real substance. The constant alarm bells and over-the-top rhetoric make it hard for people to take their concerns seriously. Maher also highlights how politics has blurred into entertainment, with celebrities jumping into the fray as if their opinions carry the same weight as seasoned analysts. Late-night hosts, actors, and musicians all seemed eager to cash in on the outrage, but in doing so, they drowned out more meaningful discussions, and that, Maher suggests, is a major part of the problem. Maher sees this as a major issue. Political discourse is being replaced with a competition over who can generate the most outrage. It's no longer about serious discussions or debating ideas, it's about scoring points, going viral, and making sure your side wins the argument, rather than actually engaging with the substance of it. And in that process, real political conversations are getting lost in the noise. Bias is another key point Maher brings up. He calls out how certain media outlets operate more like political PR machines than neutral sources of information. He reminds us of the 2016 election, when nearly every major outlet confidently predicted Hillary Clinton's victory, ignoring warning signs and dismissing concerns from those who saw a different outcome coming. When Trump won, the shock was palpable, not because it was impossible, but because so many media voices had convinced themselves and their audiences that it simply couldn't happen. And what's worse, no one seemed to learn from it. Instead of reflecting on their missteps, they doubled down, repeating the same mistakes in the years that followed. Then, Maher shifts his focus to something even more controversial, the left's supposed commitment to tolerance. He challenges the idea that they truly embrace diversity of thought, pointing out how quickly they shut down, ridicule, or ostracize anyone who doesn't fall perfectly in line with their ideology. Disagree, even slightly, and you're suddenly labeled as part of the problem. But isn't the essence of democracy about allowing different perspectives, even the ones you personally dislike? According to Maher, if the left truly wants to live up to its own values, it needs to practice the tolerance it so often preaches. Maher sees this as a troubling trend. Open debate is becoming a relic of the past, replaced by a culture where people are afraid to speak their minds. Political correctness has become so rigid that even cracking a joke can feel like a dangerous act. He questions how we got here, where free expression is no longer about exchanging ideas, but about making sure no one steps out of line. And then there's the bigger issue, the outright refusal to consider opposing viewpoints. Maher doesn't argue that every conservative argument is correct, but he does point out that completely dismissing the other side without engagement is a losing strategy. If the left truly wants to be the party of inclusivity and progress, then why not extend that philosophy to hearing out different perspectives? Even if they don't agree, at least acknowledging the concerns of millions of Americans could lead to better political discourse. But instead, it's often just finger pointing and name calling. He's been making these points for years, whether on real time or during live panel discussions, consistently challenging the left to take a hard look in the mirror. Remember when Elon Musk hosted Saturday Night Live? Even before his politics became a topic of debate, some cast members were outraged simply because he didn't fit into their ideological comfort zone. That kind of reaction, Maher argues, is part of the problem. It signals a growing intolerance for anyone who doesn't conform to a particular narrative.
Have to just respectfully disagree. I think if we've never presidential candidates talking about people getting shot in a
of course
he called for a military tribunal against her. Again, he might not do it, but you don't want to normalize the notion that that's the kind of language.
That's what he talked about.
That's the kind of language that we want to have.
No, but that wasn't. But this is the problem with. I'm sorry, the far left, is that.
I'm not the far left, but I don't think we should have presidential candidates
you're not
talking
going to
that
drag
way.
me into Trump derangement syndrome. It's not deranged to be upset and worried about the real things, like he could be a fascist. He wants to be. But if you're going to think I'm going to chase every rabbit down the hole for the next wait a second, for the next 4 years, you're wrong. I'm not going to.
I'm not telling you what to do for the next.
That's who he is. I'm just telling you. I did this once. I'm not going to do it again. That's who he is.
Okay.
If he talks about Arnold Palmer's dick, or he makes it, or he says a bad word, or says something that everybody thinks like there are shithole countries, I'm not going to lose my shit about it. I'm just not, because that is deranged.
That's who.
Isn't it?
Exactly. It's a bit ironic. Here was one of the most influential figures in the world right in front of them, but instead of engaging with him on a meaningful level, their personal bias got in the way. Rather than focusing on the substance of the conversation, some were too caught up in their own preconceived notions about Musk's political views. Maher uses this example to emphasize just how damaging this kind of closed-mindedness can be. Instead of having a balanced conversation, it turns into an emotional reaction that does nothing to advance meaningful dialogue. That's what Maher is pushing back against, the left's inability to separate personal bias from the broader conversation about policies and ideas.
I remember when Elon Musk hosted, and this is well before he was a Trumper. This is 3 or 4 years. He was just the richest man in the world. And a number of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, they didn't want to deal with him. They didn't exactly boycott, but they made it plain. And I was thinking, really? You have Elon Musk on your show for a week. You could talk to one of the most interesting, brilliant people the world has ever produced. Even about this issue that bothers you so much, that he's so rich and lots of people aren't. But no, you don't want to even deal with him. That's what I hate about the left. You're brats. You're brats and you're...
And what about when
Bill Maher isn't mincing words in his latest critique, and this time he's taking direct aim at the smug overconfidence of left-wing pundits. He's pointing out a pattern, one where media figures and political commentators double down on their mistakes instead of engaging in self-reflection. Maher argues that the left's relentless focus on attacking Trump, often with dramatic overkill, is actually their biggest weakness. It's not about ignoring Trump's controversial actions, it's about how they respond. Instead of delivering calm, rational critiques, many left-leaning voices resort to emotional hysteria that ultimately backfires. One of Ma's sharpest critiques is how political discourse has turned into a performance, with pundits and even celebrities playing the role of political analysts. From late-night talk shows to mainstream media outlets, outrage seems to have replaced serious discussion. He also calls out the blatant bias in certain media circles, pointing to the way many assumed Clinton's 2016 victory was inevitable, only to be shocked when reality didn't align with their narrative. The refusal to learn from that mistake to acknowledge blind spots is exactly what Maher is challenging. Another major issue he highlights is the so-called tolerance of the left. While they champion diversity and open-mindedness, there's often little room for differing opinions. Anyone who steps out of line is immediately labeled part of the problem. Maher sees this as a fundamental contradiction. How can you claim to support free thought while silencing opposing views? He also points to the culture of political correctness, where people are afraid to even crack a joke without fear of backlash. According to Maher, this rigid atmosphere is stifling open debate and making discussions more about policing language than exchanging ideas. Perhaps his most compelling argument is the distinction between real concerns and baseless panic when it comes to Trump. Maher doesn't shy away from criticizing harmful policies, but he insists on grounding those critiques in facts rather than hysteria. If people are worried about authoritarian overreach, he argues, their concerns should be backed by concrete evidence, not emotional doomsday predictions. His message is simple: be critical, but be rational. At the end of the day, Maher isn't asking for an overnight revolution, just a bit more self-awareness and a lot less arrogance. But does he have a point, or is he missing something? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoy content that challenges the norm, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's keep this conversation going.